A maid's mistake turns into a love story with her billionaire boss. Hello, let's hear another incredible story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I love narrating stories for you, so get ready, let's start. The morning light filtered through the towering windows of Blake Manor, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors that Amelia Carter had spent countless hours maintaining to perfection. Her reflection rippled across the surface like a ghost, silent and unassuming, just as she preferred to be. At 27, she had mastered the art of invisibility within these grandiose walls, moving through the mansion's 48 rooms like a whisper. Today, however, would be different. Today, invisibility would become impossible. The familiar weight of her cleaning cart provided little comfort as she made her way to the West Wing, where Alexander Blake's home office awaited its daily maintenance. The early October chill had crept through the manor's ancient bones, but it wasn't the only reason for the goosebumps rising on Amelia's arms. Mr. Blake had unexpectedly returned home early from his business trip to Boston, and his presence always changed the very air of the house. As she approached his office, voices drifted through the partially open door. She recognized Claire Donovan's confident tone, Mr. Blake's personal assistant, discussing something about merger documents and board meetings. Amelia hesitated, her hand hovering over the door handle. She had strict instructions never to interrupt Mr. Blake during business hours, but Claire had specifically requested that the office be cleaned before noon. "Just go in," she whispered to herself, gathering what little courage she possessed, quick and quiet like always. She knocked softly, pushing the door open when no response came. The office was empty, the voices having moved to the adjacent conference room. Perfect. She could finish her work without any awkward encounters. Amelia moved efficiently through her routine, dusting the rare first editions that lined the mahogany shelves, careful not to disturb a single page. The room smelled of leather and success, of decisions that affected thousands of lives and deals worth more money than she could imagine. Here, in this sanctuary of power, she felt most acutely the vast distance between her world and Mr. Blake's. The computer on his desk hummed softly, its screen illuminating a spreadsheet of numbers that meant nothing to her. As she approached with her duster, her elbow caught the wireless mouse, jostling it slightly. The screen changed, revealing a document titled Sterling Merger Final Contract. Amelia's heart rate quickened. She shouldn't be seeing this. She reached for the mouse to minimize the window, but her trembling fingers hit the wrong key. The document disappeared. No, she whispered, panic rising in her throat. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, trying to undo whatever she had done. Windows opened and closed, but the document remained gone. A message popped up. "Are you sure you want to permanently delete this file?" Before she could process what was happening, her cleaning cloth brushed against the keyboard. Yes was selected. The file vanished. The sound of footsteps approaching the office door sent ice through her veins. Amelia straightened up, her mind racing. Should she run? Pretend nothing happened? Confess immediately? "Need those contracts sent to legal by 3. Alexander Blake's deep voice grew closer. "The board won't wait any longer." The door opened, and there he stood, tall, imposing, his custom suit as pristine as the floors Amelia polished each day. His steel-grey eyes found her immediately, narrowing slightly at her presence near his desk. At 35, Alexander Blake carried himself with the weight of his empire, every movement calculated and precise. Claire appeared behind him, her perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on the doorframe. Her red lips curved into a slight frown at the sight of Amelia. "Mr. Blake," Amelia's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry, I was just... Is there a reason you're at my computer?" His tone was ice, sharp and cold. I was cleaning and The words stuck in her throat. "The merger contract. I think I deleted it." The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Claire's sharp intake of breath was the only sound. "You what?" Each word fell like a hammer blow. "Done, it was an accident," Amelia managed, her hands clutching her cleaning cloth like a lifeline. "I was trying to minimize the window, and that contract represented 6 months of negotiations." Alexander's voice remained eerily calm. "It was meant to be signed today. I can help fix it," Amelia offered desperately, knowing how hollow the words sounded. "Maybe there's a way to recover." "Enough!" Alexander held up his hand, silencing her. His next words came slowly, deliberately. "You've done quite enough already, Miss Carter, but since you seem so eager to help, you'll stay here until we sort out this mess, every minute of it." Claire's triumphant smile flickered at the edges of Amelia's vision. She had expected to be fired on the spot. This was different, worse, somehow. "Yes, sir," Amelia whispered, her dreams of invisibility shattered beyond repair. As Alexander moved to his desk, his presence seemed to fill the entire room, leaving no space for air. Amelia stood rooted to the spot, watching as he began typing furiously on his computer. She had just become visible in the worst possible way, and something told her that her life at Blake Manor would never be the same again. 5 hours had passed since the contract deletion, and Amelia's world had shrunk to the confines of Alexander Blake's office. She sat perched awkwardly on an Italian leather chair, worth more than her monthly salary, watching him work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. The sun had begun its descent, painting the Manhattan skyline in shades of amber and gold, but neither of them had moved to turn on the lights. "Miss Carter," Alexander's voice broke the silence, making her jump. "Coffee, black, 2 sugars." She rose immediately, grateful for any task that might make her useful. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her again. "And bring enough for yourself. This will be a long night." In the kitchen, Amelia's hands trembled as she prepared the coffee. The house staff had long since gone home, leaving the vast mansion eerily quiet. Only Claire remained, her heels clicking purposefully through distant corridors as she made calls to salvage what she could of the merger situation. Amelia's mind wandered to her small apartment in Queens, where her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, would be feeding her cat, Luna. She should have been home hours ago, should have been planning tomorrow's schedule, should have been doing anything but standing in this kitchen making coffee for the man whose business she might have just destroyed. The coffee machine hummed to life, its gentle purring a stark contrast to the chaos in her mind. As she waited, she caught her reflection in the polished surface of the refrigerator, her dark brown hair escaping its neat bun, her simple black uniform slightly wrinkled from hours of sitting. She looked exactly like what she was, a cleaning lady way out of her depth. The sound of approaching footsteps made her straighten instinctively. Claire appeared in the doorway, her Louboutins announcing her presence before she spoke. "Having fun playing secretary?" Claire's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I suppose you think this is your big break. The maid who caught the billionaire's attention." Amelia focused on pouring the coffee, willing her hands to stay steady. "I'm just trying to fix my mistake." "Oh, honey." Claire moved closer, her expensive perfume filling the space between them. "Some mistakes can't be fixed. Some people just don't belong in certain worlds. You understand what I'm saying, don't you?" Before Amelia could respond, Claire's phone buzzed. She checked it, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rising slightly. "Well, duty calls. Don't let the coffee get cold. Alexander hates that almost as much as he hates incompetence." Amelia waited until Claire's footsteps faded before releasing the breath she'd been holding. She gathered the coffee cups onto a silver tray, adding sugar and cream options despite Alexander's specific request. Something told her he wasn't thinking clearly enough to know what he really needed right now. When she returned to the office, she found Alexander standing at the window, his tall frame silhouetted against the dying light. He had removed his suit jacket, and his rolled-up sleeves revealed forearms corded with tension. "Your coffee, Mr. Blake." She set the tray down carefully on his desk. He turned, and for a moment their eyes met. In the shadowed light, his usual mask of control had slipped slightly, revealing something that looked almost like exhaustion. "You added cream. Sometimes preferences change under stress," she said softly, surprising herself with her boldness. A ghost of a smile touched his lips before vanishing. "Speaking from experience, Miss Carter." "My mother?" Amelia hesitated, then continued. "She always said crisis brings out our true tastes. When my father left, she switched from tea to black coffee. When she got sick, she went back to tea." Alexander studied her for a long moment, then reached for the cream. "Tell me about your mother." The request caught her off guard. In 2 years of working at Blake Manor, this was the first personal question he'd ever asked her. She was a housekeeper too, taught me everything I know about service, about dignity in work, no matter what the work was. She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. Amelia swallowed hard. "She never got to see me work here. She would have been proud, at least until today." Alexander added cream to his coffee, stirring it thoughtfully. "On your personnel file says you've never taken a sick day, never been late, never made a mistake until now." "I can't afford mistakes, Mr. Blake." The words came out more honestly than she intended. "People like me, we don't get second chances very often." He took a sip of his coffee, his expression unreadable. "People like you, people without safety nets, without connections, without—" She gestured vaguely at the opulent office around them. "And yet here you are, getting your second chance." He set down his cup and moved back to his computer. "Now, let's talk about how you're going to earn it. Do you know anything about contract law, Miss Carter?" "No, sir." "Then consider this your crash course." He gestured to the chair beside his desk. "We have approximately 8 hours to recreate a document that took 6 months to negotiate. I hope you're a fast learner." As Amelia settled into the chair, closer to Alexander than she'd ever been, she caught a whiff of his cologne, something expensive and subtle, like old books and cedar. She pushed the observation away, focusing instead on the screen before them. "Start with the merger terms," he instructed, his voice taking on a teacher's tone. "Or read them back to me exactly as I say them." And so began the longest night of Amelia's life, one that would reshape her understanding of not only contract law, but of the man beside her, a man who, despite his reputation for coldness, had chosen teaching over termination, patience over punishment. From somewhere in the mansion, a clock struck 9, its chimes echoing through the empty corridors like a reminder that time, like status and success, was simply another barrier waiting to be broken. Dawn crept over Manhattan like watercolor bleeding across paper, soft pinks and purples seeping into the darkness. Amelia blinked away exhaustion as she stared at the computer screen, her vision blurring from hours of focused work. The contract was nearly complete, pieced together through Alexander's remarkable memory and a series of emergency calls to lawyers across 3 time zones. "Read the last paragraph again," Alexander said, his voice rougher than usual. His tie hung loose around his neck, and his usually perfectly styled hair had become disheveled from running his fingers through it countless times. In the event of regulatory approval delays exceeding 90 days, both parties retain the right to renegotiate terms or terminate the agreement with written notice of— Amelia's voice cracked, betraying her fatigue. 30 days, he finished, reaching for his coffee cup only to find it empty. "We need to add a clause about intellectual property retention in case of termination." Amelia nodded, forcing her tired fingers to type. The night had been a crash course in corporate law, international business, and Alexander Blake himself. She'd watched his perfectionism give way to pragmatism as the hours wore on, seen glimpses of dry humor beneath his stern exterior, and witnessed moments of surprising patience as he explained complex concepts to her. "Mr. Blake," she ventured, saving the document for the 100th time, "why didn't you fire me?" The question had burned in her mind all night, and perhaps it was the exhaustion that finally gave her the courage to ask it. Alexander looked up from his phone, where he'd been reviewing emails, and studied her face. "Would you believe me if I said it was because firing you would have been more troublesome than keeping you?" "No," she answered honestly, surprising them both. He set down his phone, a hint of amusement crossing his features. No, you don't seem like someone who avoids trouble when it's warranted. Amelia gestured to the clock showing 5:47 a.m. You've spent the entire night recreating a contract instead of sleeping just to avoid trouble with the board? Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his grey eyes intent on her face. Perhaps I recognize something in your reaction to the mistake. Not excuses or denial, just determination to make it right. He paused, then added quietly, That's rarer than you might think in my world. Before Amelia could respond, the office door opened. Claire strode in, immaculate despite the early hour, carrying fresh coffee and a stack of papers. Her smile faltered slightly at the sight of Amelia still seated beside Alexander's desk. The legal team is assembled in the conference room, Claire announced, placing the coffee pointedly in front of Alexander. They're ready to review the new contract before the board meeting at 9. Her eyes flicked to Amelia. I assume we won't need any further assistance from the housekeeping staff? Alexander took a sip of the coffee and grimaced slightly. Miss Carter will continue to assist until the situation is fully resolved. Clear her schedule for the next few days. Claire's perfectly composed expression cracked for just a moment. Alexander, surely you don't think... Thank you, Claire. His tone carried a finality that even Claire wouldn't challenge. She retreated, her heels striking the floor with more force than necessary. Amelia shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I should probably go home and change before... There's a shower in the guest suite down the hall, Alexander interrupted, standing and stretching his tall frame. Claire can lend you something appropriate to wear for the day. Oh, I don't think... Consider it part of fixing the mistake, he said, his expression unreadable. The board will be more comfortable if you look the part while we explain the situation. Amelia's heart stuttered. Explain the situation? To the board? You deleted a critical contract, Miss Carter. Did you think we wouldn't have to explain that to the board of directors? A hint of his earlier severity returned to his voice. Actions have consequences in this world. It's time you learned to face them directly. She nodded, her throat tight. Yes, sir. As she stood to leave, her legs unsteady from sitting so long, Alexander added, And Miss Carter, thank you for your help tonight. You're a quicker study than I expected. The compliment, delivered in his usual detached tone, shouldn't have affected her as much as it did. But as Amelia made her way to the guest suite, she couldn't ignore the warm flutter in her chest, or the way his words seemed to chase away some of her exhaustion. The guest suite was larger than her entire apartment, with a bathroom that looked like it belonged in a luxury spa. As she stepped under the hot water, letting it wash away the tension of the night, Amelia tried to make sense of how her life had changed so dramatically in less than 24 hours. A knock at the bathroom door startled her from her thoughts. I've left some clothes on the bed. Claire's voice came through the door, honey-sweet but with an edge. Although I'm not sure anything of mine will suit you. Some people just aren't meant to wear Chanel. Amelia waited until Claire's footsteps faded before emerging from the shower. On the bed lay a black dress that probably cost more than her yearly salary, its elegant simplicity somehow more intimidating than if it had been covered in sequins and bows. As she slipped it on, the expensive fabric falling perfectly against her skin, Amelia caught her reflection in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back at her looked like a stranger, someone who could possibly belong in Alexander Blake's world, even if just for a day. But Claire's words echoed in her mind. Some people just aren't meant to wear Chanel. Some people don't belong in certain worlds. The question was, which world did Amelia truly belong in? And why did the answer suddenly seem less clear than it had just yesterday morning? The Blake Industries boardroom occupied the entire top floor of their Manhattan headquarters, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a vertigo-inducing view of the city below. Amelia stood before the floor-length mirror in the adjacent powder room, adjusting Claire's borrowed dress for the 100th time. The woman in the reflection looked polished, professional, a carefully constructed facade that felt as fragile as spun glass. Stop fidgeting. Claire appeared behind her, arms crossed. Although I must say, you clean up surprisingly well, almost like a real executive's assistant. Her smile was sharp as a paper cut. "Of course. That's not quite your role, is it?" "I'm just here to explain what happened with the contract," Amelia replied, trying to channel Alexander's calm demeanor. "Oh, sweetie." Claire stepped closer, adjusting Amelia's collar with mock concern. "You're here because Alexander is making a point. He loves his little social experiments. Last year, he hired a high school dropout as a junior analyst just to prove the board wrong about traditional credentials." She paused, examining her perfect manicure. The poor boy lasted 3 weeks. Before Amelia could respond, Alexander's deep voice called from the boardroom. "Miss Carter." She took a deep breath and stepped into the room. 12 pairs of eyes turned to study her, the board members in their expensive suits, their faces a mix of curiosity and barely concealed disdain. Alexander stood at the head of the massive oak table, his authority radiating through his perfectly tailored suit and commanding posture. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice filling the room effortlessly, "I believe we need to address the elephant in the room regarding yesterday's contract situation." A silver-haired man near the end of the table, Robert Lancaster, Amelia remembered from her hasty briefing, cleared his throat. "Yes, Alexander, perhaps you could explain why we're discussing a crucial merger with the cleaning staff present. Miss Carter is here because she's directly involved in the situation," Alexander replied coolly, "and because she spent the entire night helping reconstruct the contract, showing more dedication to this company's interests than some people who are paid significantly more." The subtle rebuke sent a ripple through the room. Amelia felt Claire shift beside her, tension radiating from her rigid posture. "The contract has been recreated," Alexander continued, nodding to his assistant. "Claire, please distribute the copies." As Claire moved around the table, her heels clicking against the marble floor, Alexander began explaining the previous night's work. Amelia listened, amazed at how he transformed their exhausting hours into a narrative of efficiency and problem-solving. He never mentioned her mistake directly, instead focusing on the solutions and improvements they'd made to the original document. "Miss Carter," he suddenly turned to her, "would you explain the new intellectual property provisions we added?" Amelia's heart stopped. This wasn't part of their preparation. She could feel the board members' stares, could sense Claire's smirk without having to see it. But then she remembered the night before, Alexander's patient explanations, the logic behind each clause, the hours spent understanding every detail. Taking a steadying breath, she began to speak. The words came easier than expected, her understanding of the contract surprising even herself. When she finished, Alexander's slight nod sent a wave of relief through her body. "Well," Robert Lancaster spoke again, his tone markedly different, "it seems the situation has been handled creatively. Though I must ask, Alexander, isn't it somewhat unorthodox to have household staff involved in corporate matters?" "What's unorthodox, Robert, is clinging to outdated hierarchies when talent and dedication present themselves." Alexander's voice remained pleasant, but there was steel beneath the surface. "Miss Carter has proven herself an asset in this situation. I expect her to continue assisting with the merger process." A younger board member leaned forward. "And what exactly would her role be?" "She'll work directly with me," Alexander stated, ignoring Claire's sharp intake of breath. "Consider it an interim position while we evaluate long-term arrangements." The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of financial projections and timeline discussions. Amelia stood quietly, her mind reeling from Alexander's announcement, when the board finally filed out, leaving only Alexander, Claire, and herself in the vast room. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Alexander," Claire's voice was carefully controlled, "a word in private." He glanced at his watch. "Later. Miss Carter and I have a lunch meeting to prepare for. The Sterling executives will want to review these changes in person." Claire's perfectly painted lips pressed into a thin line. "Of course. Should I call your usual car service?" "That won't be necessary. Miss Carter and I will walk. It's only a few blocks to Le Bernardin." He turned to Amelia. I assume you've never been?" She shook her head, still processing the morning's events. Then consider it part of your education." He gathered his papers, barely glancing at Claire. "Hold my calls unless it's absolutely urgent." As they left the boardroom, Amelia caught their reflection in the glass walls, Alexander's commanding presence, her borrowed elegance, and behind them, Claire's perfectly composed fury. The image seemed to symbolize everything that had shifted in the past 24 hours, every boundary that had blurred, every wall that had begun to crack. Walking through the office, Amelia could feel the stares and whispers following them. She was no longer invisible, no longer safely hidden in the background. She had stepped into the light of Alexander Blake's world, and while part of her thrilled at the opportunity, another part wondered if Claire was right, if some people weren't meant for certain worlds, if some boundaries weren't meant to be crossed. But as they stepped into the elevator and Alexander asked her opinion on the morning's meeting, his grey eyes showing genuine interest in her response, Amelia realized it was too late for such questions. She had already crossed the boundary, stepped through the looking glass, and the only way forward was through, even if she had to learn to walk in borrowed Louboutins to do it. The October sun cast long shadows across Central Park West as Alexander and Amelia walked toward Le Bernardin. Despite her borrowed Louboutins pinching her toes, Amelia matched his long strides, her mind racing with questions about her new role, questions she wasn't sure she had the right to ask. "You're thinking too loudly," Alexander said, breaking the silence. His hands were in his pockets, his posture more relaxed than she'd ever seen it. "Ask what you want to ask, Miss Carter. Why are you doing this?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "The board meeting, this lunch, this position, is it really just because I helped with the contract?" Alexander slowed his pace, considering her question. A street performer's saxophone notes drifted through the air, providing an unexpected soundtrack to their conversation. "Do you know why I started Blake Industries?" The sudden change of subject caught her off guard. "The company website says you saw an opportunity in the market for innovative tech solutions." That's the official story. His lips curved slightly. "The truth is, I started it to prove my father wrong. He said I'd never amount to anything without his connections, his influence." Alexander's jaw tightened. He believed success was a birthright, not something earned. They stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. A mother hurried past with 2 small children, their laughter a stark contrast to the weight of Alexander's words. "The night you deleted that contract," he continued, "you could have made excuses, could have blamed the computer, the circumstances, me for leaving it open. Instead, you owned your mistake and worked to fix it. That kind of integrity—" He paused, searching for the right words. "It's valuable. More valuable than an Ivy League degree or the right family connections." The light changed, and they crossed the street in silence, Amelia processing his words. As they approached the restaurant, Alexander added quietly, "Besides, watching Claire try to maintain her composure all morning has been rather entertaining." Amelia couldn't help but laugh, the sound surprising them both. She did look like she was sucking on a lemon during the board meeting. "Miss Carter," Alexander's eyes crinkled at the corners, "was that spite I just heard in your voice? How refreshing." Before she could respond, they reached Le Bernardin's elegant entrance. The maître d' recognized Alexander immediately, ushering them to a private dining room where 2 men in expensive suits were already waiting. "Richard, James." Alexander greeted them with practiced ease. "I believe you'll find the revised contract addresses all your concerns." The next 2 hours were a master class in corporate negotiation. Amelia watched Alexander navigate the conversation with surgical precision, addressing concerns before they were fully voiced, offering concessions that seemed generous but ultimately served his interests. Between courses of exquisitely prepared seafood she could barely identify, she found herself taking mental notes on his technique. "And your assistant has reviewed all the changes?" Richard Sterling asked, gesturing toward Amelia with his wine glass. Miss Carter has been instrumental in the revision process, Alexander replied smoothly. In fact, she suggested the new intellectual property provisions. James Sterling raised an eyebrow. Did she now? And what made you think of that particular addition, Miss Carter? Amelia felt Alexander's attention shift to her, along with both Sterling executives. She took a sip of water, buying herself a moment to think. Actually, it was something Mr. Blake said about regulatory delays that triggered the idea. If either party could terminate the agreement, it seemed logical to protect both companies' innovations, especially given the competitive nature of the tech sector. Richard Sterling nodded approvingly. Sharp thinking. Where did you study business law? I didn't, Amelia admitted, feeling Alexander tense slightly beside her. But I believe sometimes an outsider's perspective can be valuable. We see patterns that might be overlooked by those too close to the situation. A heavy silence followed her words. Then James Sterling laughed, a genuine sound that broke the tension. Well said, young lady Alexander. You might want to keep this one around. Good instincts are harder to find than law degrees. The rest of lunch passed more comfortably, with both Sterling executives treating Amelia as a legitimate participant in the discussion, rather than an ornamental presence. As they stood to leave, handshakes and pleasantries were exchanged with genuine warmth. Outside, the afternoon sun had warmed the city considerably. Amelia felt lighter somehow, as if she'd passed a test she hadn't known she was taking. Well done, Alexander said quietly as they walked back toward the office. Though I'm curious, what patterns did you actually see in the contract? That it was written by people who've never had to worry about losing everything, she answered honestly. When you have nothing, you think differently about protection. Alexander stopped walking, turning to face her fully. For a moment, his carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing something raw and genuine beneath. You continue to surprise me, Miss Carter. Is that a good thing? I haven't decided yet. His phone buzzed, breaking the moment. As he checked it, his expression darkened. Claire says there's an urgent situation at the office. Something about leaked information about the merger. Amelia's stomach dropped. What kind of leaked information? The kind that shouldn't exist. His voice had returned to its usual businesslike tone. Come on. Our afternoon just got considerably more complicated. As they hurried back to the office, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that the leak wasn't accidental, and that her brief taste of belonging in Alexander's world was about to be tested in ways she couldn't imagine. The Blake Industries lobby was in chaos when Alexander and Amelia returned from lunch. Reporters clustered outside the glass doors like hungry wolves, their cameras flashing at anyone who entered or exited. Security guards formed a tight barrier, their faces grim as they checked IDs and turned away unwanted visitors. Alexander guided Amelia through a private entrance, his hand hovering protectively near her lower back. The touch was so light she might have imagined it, but its warmth lingered as they rode the executive elevator in tense silence. Claire was waiting in Alexander's office, her perfect posture somehow even more rigid than usual. It's bad, she said without preamble, handing Alexander a tablet. Someone leaked details about the contract deletion to Business Insider. They're spinning it as a sign of internal instability. Amelia's blood ran cold as Alexander scrolled through the article. His expression remained neutral, but she could see the muscle working in his jaw. Sources inside Blake Industries reveal chaos at the top, he read aloud. A crucial merger contract was reportedly deleted by an unqualified staff member recently promoted to a sensitive position, raising questions about CEO Alexander Blake's judgment. He set down the tablet carefully, too carefully. They have direct quotes about last night. Claire's eyes flickered to Amelia. The board is demanding an emergency meeting. Our stock has already dropped 3 points. Who knew the details about last night? Alexander's voice was deadly quiet. Only the people in the boardroom this morning, Claire replied. And of course, anyone Miss Carter might have told. I didn't tell anyone, Amelia protested, her heart pounding. I wouldn't. No calls to friends? No texts about your exciting new position? Claire's tone was pure poison honey. It must have been tempting to share your rapid advancement. Enough! Alexander's command cut through the tension. Claire, postpone the board meeting until tomorrow morning. I want every copy of that contract tracked. Every email, every digital footprint. He turned to Amelia. Miss Carter, my study at the manor. We need to review the timeline of events. Claire stepped forward. Alexander, surely you don't still trust the study, Miss Carter, he repeated, ignoring Claire completely. And I'll meet you there in an hour. The drive to Blake Manor passed in a blur. Amelia sat in the back of Alexander's town car, watching the city streets blur past as her mind raced. Someone had deliberately leaked the story, twisting it to cause maximum damage. But why? And why now? The manor was eerily quiet when she arrived. The regular staff had gone home, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the weight of suspicion hanging over her. She made her way to Alexander's study, the room where everything had started just over 24 hours ago. Standing by the window, Amelia watched the sun begin its descent behind the Manhattan skyline. So much had changed since yesterday morning. She had gone from invisible to infamous in the span of a day, and now everything she had gained might slip through her fingers like smoke. You're in my spot. She turned to find Alexander in the doorway, his tie loosened and a glass of amber liquid in his hand. Despite everything, her heart skipped at the sight of him. Your spot. Best view in the house. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. I do my best thinking here. And what are you thinking now? He took a sip from his glass. That someone is playing a very dangerous game. His grey eyes met hers. Tell me honestly, Miss Carter, did you share any information about the contract or your new position? No. She held his gaze steadily. The only person I've even spoken to since yesterday is Mrs. Rodriguez, my neighbor who's feeding my cat. And somehow I doubt she's your corporate leak. A hint of amusement crossed his face. A cat person. I wouldn't have guessed. Luna. She's a rescue. All black except for one white paw, like she stepped in paint. Amelia stopped herself, realizing she was rambling. I'm sorry, that's not relevant to... It's exactly relevant. Alexander set down his glass. You're telling me about something you care about, something personal. People tend to be most honest when they talk about what they love. The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. Mr. Blake. Alexander, he corrected softly. I think we're past formalities, don't you? Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. The spell broke as he checked the message, his expression darkening. The Sterling Group is wavering, he said. Their board is concerned about the negative publicity. They're considering other options. Can they do that? Back out now? They can do whatever they want until the contracts are signed. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare display of frustration. Someone knew exactly when to leak this story for maximum impact. Claire, Amelia said quietly. Alexander's head snapped up. That's a serious accusation. She's the only one who knew everything about the contract, about last night, about the board meeting, and she has motive, which is me. Amelia swallowed hard. Or rather, what I represent, change, disruption, a threat to her position. Alexander was silent for a long moment, studying her. And you're more observant than people give you credit for. When you're invisible, you see things others miss. She hesitated, then added, like the way Claire looks at you when she thinks no one's watching. Something shifted in Alexander's expression, recognition, perhaps, or resignation. If you're right about Claire... Alexander! Claire's voice rang out from the hallway, as if summoned by their conversation. She appeared in the doorway, slightly breathless. I've been trying to reach you. The Sterling Group just called. They want to meet tonight. Tonight? Alexander frowned. Why not wait for the morning meeting? They're spooked by the publicity. Richard Sterling thinks if we move quickly, we can get ahead of the story. Claire glanced at Amelia. He specifically requested a private dinner, just the principals. The emphasis on private was subtle but clear. Amelia felt the familiar weight of exclusion settling back onto her shoulders. "Fine," Alexander said after a moment. "Set it up. Miss Carter should probably go home," Claire interjected smoothly. "It's been a long day after all, and I'm sure her cat misses her." Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly at the cat reference. "Miss Carter will stay. We still have matters to discuss." "Of course." Claire's smile was perfect, professional, and utterly false. "Undie, I'll make the arrangements for dinner. Shall I have the car brought around?" After she left, silence fell over the study. The sun had set completely now, leaving the room in twilight shadows that seemed to mirror the growing uncertainty between them. "You should know," Alexander said finally, "that I don't trust easily. It's not in my nature. I know, but I'm trusting you now." He turned to face her fully. "Don't make me regret it." As Amelia watched him leave for his dinner meeting, she couldn't shake the feeling that the next few hours would determine not just her future, but the nature of whatever was growing between them. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, Claire was moving pieces on a board that Amelia was only beginning to understand. Left alone in the vast study of Blake Manor, Amelia found herself drawn to Alexander's desk. In the soft glow of the desk lamp, she could still see traces of their all-night work session, empty coffee cups, scattered notes, the ghost of shared moments that now felt impossibly fragile. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez about Luna. As she typed a quick reply, a notification from Business Insider flashed across her screen. Her heart stopped when she saw the headline, "Blake Industries Scandal Deepens. Sources reveal romantic entanglement behind failed merger." With trembling fingers, she opened the article. Anonymous sources claimed she and Alexander had been secretly involved for months, suggesting her promotion was the result of their relationship rather than merit. The article painted her as a manipulative social climber who had orchestrated the contract deletion to force Alexander's hand. "Oh, I thought you might have seen it by now." Amelia spun around to find Claire standing in the doorway, a manila folder in her manicured hands. Unlike their previous encounters, Claire made no attempt to hide her hostility behind a polite mask. "You did this," Amelia said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Did I?" Claire stepped into the room, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "Undie, or did you do it yourself when you decided to reach above your station?" She placed the folder on Alexander's desk. "The board will see these tomorrow morning. Surveillance photos of you entering Alexander's private elevator at odd hours. Timestamps from your keycard showing late-night access to his office, all perfectly innocent, I'm sure, but we were working on the contract," Amelia protested. "You know that, do I?" Claire's smile was razor-sharp. "What I know is that in less than 48 hours, you've managed to position yourself exactly where you wanted to be. Quite impressive for a mere housekeeper. Why are you doing this? Because people like you are dangerous, Amelia. You make powerful men forget themselves, forget their responsibilities." Claire's composure cracked slightly, revealing something raw beneath. "I've spent years protecting Alexander from his own worst impulses, from people who would take advantage of his occasional lapses in judgment." "You're in love with him," Amelia realized aloud. "I'm loyal to him," Claire corrected sharply. "There's a difference. Love is selfish. Love makes people weak." She moved closer, her expensive perfume filling the air between them. "Look at what you've already cost him, his reputation, the merger, the board's confidence. And for what? So you could play Cinderella for a few days." Before Amelia could respond, voices echoed from the hallway. Alexander appeared in the doorway, his expression thunderous. Behind him stood Richard Sterling, looking grave. "Claire?" Alexander's voice was ice. "What are you doing here?" "Delivering some documents for tomorrow's board meeting," Claire replied smoothly. "I was just explaining to Miss Carter that her presence might not be required." Richard Sterling cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Alexander, given the circumstances, perhaps we should continue our discussion in private." "No." Alexander's eyes locked onto the folder on his desk. "Whatever needs to be said can be said here." He picked up the folder, flipping through its contents. With each page, his jaw tightened further. "Mr. Sterling," Amelia started. "I can explain." "There's nothing to explain, Miss Carter." Sterling's tone was kind, but firm. "But you must understand how this looks. The timing of the contract deletion, your sudden promotion, these allegations. Allegations, I assume, were conveniently provided by a reliable source." Alexander's question was directed at Claire, who met his gaze without flinching. "I have a responsibility to protect this company's interests," she said, "even from you, if necessary, by manufacturing a scandal, by exposing a vulnerability before our competitors could exploit it." Claire's voice softened. "Alexander, you know I'm right. The board would never accept this situation. The Sterling Group is already wavering. We need to contain the damage." Amelia watched the exchange with growing horror, seeing her brief glimpse of belonging crumble before her eyes. But it was the look on Alexander's face that truly broke her heart. Doubt, barely perceptible, but unmistakably there. "Alexander," she said quietly, "you can't believe—" "Miss Carter," his voice was formal, distant, "I think it's best if you go home now." The words hit her like a physical blow. "You're letting her win." "This isn't about winning." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "This is about what's best for the company, for everyone involved." Claire's triumphant smile was almost gentle. "I'll have security escort you out." "That won't be necessary." Amelia straightened her spine, channeling every ounce of dignity she possessed. "I know my way out. I've been cleaning these halls long enough." She walked past them, head held high despite the burning in her eyes. At the door, she paused, turning back one last time. "You know what's funny? When I deleted that contract, I thought it was the worst mistake of my life, but I was wrong. The worst mistake was believing I could belong in your world." The walk through Blake Manor's grand hallways felt endless. Each step in her borrowed designer shoes echoed like judgment. Every shadow seemed to whisper Claire's words. Some people aren't meant for certain worlds. Outside, the October night had turned bitter cold, but Amelia barely felt it. She walked to the nearest subway station in her expensive dress and painful heels, just another ghost in the city of broken dreams. When she finally reached her small apartment in Queens, Luna greeted her with concerned meows, weaving between her legs as she kicked off the Louboutins and let Claire's dress pool on the floor. In her own worn pajamas, surrounded by her humble belongings, Amelia finally allowed herself to cry. Not for the loss of opportunity or status, but for the glimpse of connection she'd felt with Alexander, the understanding that had seemed to transcend their different worlds. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with notifications about the scandal, each one a fresh wound. Finally, she turned it off, curled up with Luna on her second-hand couch, and tried to remember who she had been just 2 days ago, before she dared to dream of something more. But as she drifted into an exhausted sleep, one thought kept circling in her mind. She had seen something real in Alexander, something true beneath his carefully controlled exterior. And despite everything, despite Claire's machinations and his own doubts, she couldn't quite believe he was the kind of man who would let lies destroy what they had begun to build. The question was, would he realize that before it was too late? Alexander Blake stood at his study window as dawn painted Manhattan in shades of grey, the same position where he'd stood with Amelia just hours before. An untouched glass of scotch sat on his desk, next to Claire's folder of damning photographs. He hadn't slept, spending the night instead reviewing security footage, email logs, and his own conscience. "The board meeting starts in an hour," Claire's voice came from behind him. "The car is waiting." He didn't turn around. "Tell me something, Claire. How long did it take you to plan this?" "I don't know what you—" "The timestamps on the surveillance photos." He finally faced her, his voice deadly quiet. "They're from before the contract deletion. You've been watching her for weeks, haven't you?" Claire's composure wavered for just a moment. "I watch everyone who gets close to you. It's my job." "Your job." He picked up one of the photos, Amelia entering his private elevator the night of the contract crisis. Or was it your job to leak the story to Business Insider, to manufacture a scandal? I protected you. Claire stepped forward, her usual polish showing cracks. She was a liability, Alexander, a distraction you couldn't afford right now. A distraction? He laughed humorlessly. Tell me, what exactly was I being distracted from? The merger, the company, or you? In Queens, Amelia sat at her small kitchen table, staring at her resignation letter. Luna prowled the apartment restlessly, sensing her distress. The morning news played quietly on her laptop, business channels buzzing with speculation about Blake Industries and the failing merger. Her phone had dozens of missed calls, reporters, mostly, but also several from her fellow housekeeping staff at Blake Manor. Word had spread quickly about her dramatic fall from grace. She couldn't face any of them, couldn't bear to hear the mixture of pity and judgment in their voices. A knock at her door startled her. Through the peephole, she saw Mrs. Rodriguez holding what looked like fresh-baked banana bread. I saw the news, her elderly neighbor said when Amelia let her in. Those vultures don't know what they're talking about, don't they? Amelia accepted the bread with a weak smile. I did get involved in things way above my position. Maybe Claire was right. Some people should stay in their place. Mrs. Rodriguez clicked her tongue disapprovingly. My dear, if everyone stayed in their place, nothing would ever change. You think I came to this country to stay in my place? Back at Blake Industries, the morning board meeting had devolved into chaos. Alexander stood at the head of the conference table, his patience wearing dangerously thin. The evidence speaks for itself, Robert Lancaster was saying. This scandal has already cost us the Sterling merger. We need to take decisive action to restore confidence. Evidence? Alexander's voice cut through the murmurs. You mean the carefully curated collection of half-truths and implications? Tell me, Robert, did anyone bother to verify when these photos were taken, or did we all just accept Claire's narrative without question? Claire shifted in her seat. Alexander, perhaps we should discuss this in private. No more private discussions. He held up his phone. I spent the night doing what we should have done immediately, investigating. The security logs show exactly when Amelia entered and left the building. Every visit corresponds perfectly with her housekeeping schedule, except for the night of the contract incident, which multiple witnesses can verify was spent right here, helping save the merger. Be that as it may, another board member interjected, the public perception was deliberately manipulated. Alexander's gaze locked onto Claire. The first Business Insider story was leaked exactly 3 minutes after I left for dinner with the Sterling Group. The second story, about the alleged romantic relationship, went live during that dinner, almost as if someone wanted to ensure maximum damage to both the merger and Amelia's reputation. The boardroom fell silent as the implications sank in. Claire's face had gone pale, but she maintained her composure. Everything I did was to protect this company's interests. Was it? Alexander's voice was quiet, but carried to every corner of the room. Or was it to protect your own? In her apartment, Amelia was finally reading through her messages when one stopped her cold. It was from the night janitor at Blake Industries, sent hours after she'd left. You should know, Miss Donovan was in Mr. Blake's office for an hour before the contract disappeared. Saw her on my rounds. She was at his computer. Didn't think anything of it at the time, but after all this business with the leak, thought you should know. Amelia's hands shook as she reread the message. The contract deletion hadn't been her mistake at all. It had been Claire setting the stage for her own scheme. Her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Miss Carter. Alexander's voice sent her heart racing. I believe I owe you an apology. Alexander. No, please, let me finish. He sounded tired but determined. I've spent my life building walls to protect myself, trusting systems and evidence over instincts and emotions. Last night, I let those walls make me doubt the one person who has shown me nothing but genuine integrity. Amelia closed her eyes, fighting back tears. You hurt me, I know. His voice softened. But if you'll let me, I'd like to explain in person. There are some things you need to know about the contract deletion. About Claire, I already know. She told him about the janitor's message. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Finally, Alexander spoke again, his voice carrying a warmth she'd missed. Have dinner with me tonight. Not as my employee, not as part of some business arrangement, just dinner. In the background, Amelia could hear the chaos of the board meeting continuing. Don't you have a company crisis to manage? Some things are more important, he paused. I've spent too long letting fear of vulnerability dictate my choices. Claire knew that, used it against both of us. I won't make that mistake again. Amelia looked around her small apartment, at Luna sleeping in a patch of sunlight, at Mrs. Rodriguez's banana bread cooling on her counter. This was her world. Honest, simple, real. And maybe that was exactly what Alexander needed. Okay, she said softly. Dinner, but not at Le Bernardin. His laugh, genuine and unguarded, warmed her heart. Where then? I know a little Italian place in Queens. No photographers, no pressure, just good food and honest conversation. Perfect. The smile was evident in his voice. Oh, and Amelia, wear your own shoes this time. I think we've both had enough of pretending to be something we're not. Mama Rosa's had been a fixture in Queens for over 40 years, its red checkered tablecloths and candlelit ambiance unchanged by time or trend. Amelia sat in her favorite corner booth, wearing jeans and a soft blue sweater that felt like armor after days of borrowed designer clothes. Through the front window, she watched Alexander's sleek black Bentley pull up to the curb. She held her breath as he stepped out, half expecting to see him in his usual impeccable suit. Instead, he wore dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made him look younger, more approachable, more human. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, ducking slightly under the low doorframe. Rosa herself intercepted him, her tiny frame barely reaching his chest. "You must be Alexander," she said, her Italian accent thick with warmth. "Amelia's friend." "I hope to be," he replied, surprising Amelia with his humility. Rosa led him to the booth, patting Amelia's shoulder as she passed. "I bring you the special tonight." No menu needed. Alexander slid into the booth, taking in the worn leather seats and the wall of family photos behind Amelia's head. "This place is real," Amelia suggested, when he trailed off. "I was going to say wonderful." His grey eyes met hers. Like stepping into someone's home. That's exactly what it is. Rosa and her husband opened this place in 1982. Their grandson Tony does most of the cooking now, but Rosa still makes all the desserts. Amelia fidgeted with her water glass. "I used to come here with my mom when I was little, on special occasions." Alexander's expression softened. "Tell me more about her." And so she did. Over plates of handmade pasta and glasses of house-red wine, Amelia shared stories of her mother, her strength, her dignity, her unwavering belief that honest work was its own kind of nobility. Alexander listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was truly hearing her, not just being polite. "She sounds remarkable," he said, as Rosa cleared their plates. "She would have been proud of how you handled everything these past few days, even running away last night, especially that." He leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "You stood up for yourself, refused to let anyone, including me, diminish your worth. That takes courage." "What happened at the board meeting?" she asked, changing the subject before his words could make her cry. "After our phone call?" Alexander sat back, running a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of frustration. Claire resigned. Or rather, she was given the opportunity to resign before being fired. The board is launching a full investigation into her activities, including her role in the contract deletion and the Sterling merger. Dead for now. But honestly, he smiled slightly, "then I'm not sure I want to do business with people who'd let tabloid rumors influence their decisions." Rosa appeared with 2 plates of tiramisu and fresh espresso. "On the house," she announced, "for new beginnings." They ate in comfortable silence for a moment, the rich coffee and delicate dessert creating a bubble of intimacy in the bustling restaurant. "Can I ask you something?" Amelia set down her fork. "Why did you really keep me around after the contract incident?" "The truth this time." Alexander considered the question carefully. "Do you remember what you said that first night about people without safety nets?" She nodded. "I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who have every advantage, every safety net imaginable, and yet most of them would have crumbled under the pressure you faced. But you—" He shook his head in wonder. "You showed more grace and resilience than anyone I've ever met." "That's not exactly a high bar, considering the people you usually meet," she teased. His laugh, rich and unrestrained, drew smiles from nearby diners. "Fair point. But it's more than that. You see the world differently than I do, than most people in my circle do. You understand value beyond dollars and cents." "Is that why you're here tonight?" "To study how the other half lives. I'm here because for the first time in years, I feel like myself." His hand moved across the table, fingers brushing hers tentatively. "Not Alexander Blake, CEO. Not the man my father said would never amount to anything. Just me." The touch sent electricity through her skin, but Amelia forced herself to think clearly. This could be complicated. "The press, the board, your investors, they're not going to understand. Let me worry about them." His fingers intertwined with hers. "The question is, are you willing to give us, a real chance? No pretenses, no power dynamics. Just two people trying to figure out if what they feel is real." Before she could answer, Tony emerged from the kitchen with his phone. Amelia, you might want to see this." He handed her the phone, open to a news article. The headline made her stomach drop. "Claire Donovan tells all, the truth behind the Blake Industries scandal." Alexander read it over her shoulder, his hand tightening around hers. "Well," he said quietly, "I suppose that's one way to answer the question about complications." Amelia looked at their joined hands, then at his face, open, vulnerable, waiting for her response. Behind them, Rosa was humming as she arranged fresh flowers on the counter. Outside, cars honked and subway trains rumbled underground. Real life, with all its mess and beauty, waited to either tear them apart or prove that sometimes the most unlikely connections are the ones worth fighting for. She squeezed his hand. "I never did like Easy anyway." The smile that lit up his face was answer enough. Whatever Claire's article said, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Not as CEO and housekeeper, not as representatives of different worlds, but as two people who had found something genuine in a world of pretense. Rosa appeared with more coffee, her knowing smile saying she'd seen it all before. "In my restaurant," she declared, "love always wins, even against front-page news." Claire's article hit like a tsunami, washing away the peaceful bubble of Mama Rosa's in an instant. Amelia's phone buzzed incessantly with notifications as she and Alexander read the piece on Tony's phone, their hands still clasped across the table. The article was a masterpiece of subtle manipulation. Claire painted herself as the loyal protector, forced to take dramatic action to save Alexander from himself. She described Amelia as a skilled manipulator who had orchestrated everything from the beginning, using the contract deletion as leverage to seduce her way into Alexander's inner circle. "She makes me sound like a character from a soap opera," Amelia said, trying to laugh but failing. "The ambitious housemaid who dared to reach above her station. She even mentioned my mother's illness, suggesting I used sympathy to manipulate you." Alexander's jaw clenched. "I'll have my lawyers—" "No!" Amelia squeezed his hand. "That's exactly what she wants. More drama, more headlines, more proof that I'm disrupting your life." Outside Mama Rosa's, camera flashes began appearing through the window. Someone had leaked their location. Rosa immediately started closing the blinds, muttering Italian curses under her breath. "Back door," Tony announced, appearing beside their table. "Through the kitchen. My car's in the alley." Alexander stood, keeping hold of Amelia's hand. "We can go to the manor. It has better security." My apartment, Amelia said firmly. If we're going to do this, really do this, then you need to see all of me. No more hiding in either of our worlds. The kitchen was warm and fragrant with garlic and herbs. Rosa pressed a bag of fresh cannoli into Amelia's hands as they hurried through. For strength, she said with a wink. And tell that woman who wrote lies. In my country, we have ways of dealing with such people. Tony's beat-up Honda Civic was hardly the vehicle anyone expected Alexander Blake to escape in, which made it perfect. As they pulled away, Amelia caught glimpses of confused photographers searching for the missing Bentley. The drive to her apartment was quiet, both of them processing Claire's article and its implications. When they arrived, Amelia felt a sudden wave of self-consciousness. After the grandeur of Blake Manor, her small walk-up must seem impossibly modest. But Alexander's expression as he entered her apartment held only warmth and curiosity. Luna immediately approached him, winding between his legs with uncharacteristic friendliness. She never likes strangers, Amelia said, watching in amazement as Alexander knelt to scratch behind Luna's ears. But I've always been more of a cat person myself, he admitted. Dogs want to be loved, cats want to be understood. It's a crucial difference. He stood and looked around her apartment, taking in the worn but comfortable furniture, the walls covered in photographs, the small balcony with its collection of thriving plants. It's exactly like you, he said softly. Small and shabby, real. He moved to examine the photos. Are these all yours? Amelia joined him, aware of his presence in a way that made her skin tingle. Photography was my mother's hobby. She taught me everything I know. It became our thing, especially near the end. When she was too sick to go places, I'd bring the world to her through pictures. Alexander stopped at a particular photo, a striking black and white image of an elderly woman's hands folding dough. This is beautiful. That's Rosa, from about a year ago. I was trying to capture, she hesitated, searching for the right words, the dignity of work, he finished. The beauty in everyday moments. Yes, she looked at him in surprise. Exactly. He turned to face her, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his grey eyes. You know what I thought the first time I really looked at you? Not just saw you, but really looked. She shook her head. And I thought, here's someone who sees the world as it really is, and still manages to find beauty in it. His hand came up to cup her cheek. Do you know how rare that is? Amelia leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. Alexander. His phone rang, shattering the moment. The board chairman's name flashed on the screen. Take it, Amelia said. We can't hide from reality forever, he answered, his CEO persona sliding back into place, but not completely. Something softer remained in his eyes as they stayed fixed on her. Yes, I've seen the article, he said into the phone. No, I don't need an emergency board meeting because I'm going to handle this my way. He paused, listening. Actually, I'm glad you called. I want to make something absolutely clear. Amelia Carter is not a scandal to be managed or a problem to be solved. She's the woman I'm dating. If the board has an issue with that, you know where to find my resignation letter. Amelia's heart stopped. He was choosing her over everything. His company, his reputation, his entire world. After he hung up, she found her voice. You can't give up Blake Industries. It's your life's work. No, he said simply. It's my father's legacy that I've been trying to live up to. Maybe it's time to build something of my own. He glanced around her apartment. Something real. Amelia's television suddenly caught their attention. Claire was giving a live interview, tears glistening perfectly in her eyes as she expressed her deep concern for Alexander's well-being. She's good, Amelia admitted grudgingly. The devoted assistant, heartbroken by her boss's downfall. It's quite a performance. Alexander's expression hardened as he watched Claire spin her story. Then he looked at Amelia, and a slow smile spread across his face. You know what? I think it's time we gave them a different story. What did you have in mind? He pulled out his phone again. How would you feel about giving an exclusive interview? Not to defend ourselves or attack Claire, but to tell the truth. The whole truth, about the contract, about us, about everything. That's risky, she warned. The press can twist anything. Then we'll do it live. No editing, no spinning. He touched her chin gently. Just us, being real. What do you say? Amelia looked at the television where Claire continued her performance, then at her walls of photographs, capturing real moments, real emotions, real life. Finally, she looked at Alexander, the man who had chosen authenticity over appearance, truth over tradition. Okay, she said, but on one condition. Name it. We do the interview here, not at Blake Industries, not at some fancy studio, here, in my real world. His smile was answer enough, but he sealed it with a kiss, their first, soft and sweet and tasting faintly of Rosa's tiramisu. When they separated, Amelia knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, this moment was real, and real was worth fighting for. The next morning, Amelia's small apartment had been transformed into an impromptu television studio. A CNN crew worked efficiently to set up lighting and microphones while keeping their equipment away from Luna, who watched the proceedings with suspicious yellow eyes from her perch on the bookshelf. Anderson Cooper himself sat in Amelia's second-hand armchair, looking somehow both out of place and perfectly at ease. He was reviewing his notes while the crew made final adjustments, occasionally glancing at the photographs on Amelia's walls with genuine interest. 3 minutes to live, called the producer. Alexander, sitting beside Amelia on her worn leather couch, squeezed her hand. We can still cancel. No, she said firmly. No more hiding. She had spent the morning preparing not by rehearsing answers or planning talking points, but by taking photographs. The sunrise over Queens, early commuters hurrying to the subway, Rosa opening her restaurant for the day, normal moments that reminded her who she was and why authenticity mattered. 60 seconds. Anderson looked up from his notes. Remember, this is a conversation, not an interrogation. Just tell your story. Thank you for agreeing to do this, Alexander said to him. Especially here. Are you kidding? The billionaire CEO and the housekeeper giving their first interview from her Queens apartment. This is what real journalism is about, finding truth in unexpected places. 30 seconds. Amelia smoothed her simple blue dress, her own this time, not borrowed from anyone. Her mother's silver locket hung around her neck, carrying a small photo of them together at Mama Rosa's years ago. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3. The red light blinked on, and Anderson Cooper turned to the camera with his signature grace. Good morning. I'm Anderson Cooper, coming to you live from an apartment in Queens, New York, where I'm sitting down with Blake Industries CEO Alexander Blake and photographer-turned-housekeeper Amelia Carter for their first interview since the scandal that has captivated Wall Street and social media alike. Thank you both for having us in your home. Amelia, thank you for coming, she replied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Let's start at the beginning, Anderson said. The contract deletion that sparked this entire situation. Claire Donovan's article painted a very specific picture of what happened that day. What's your version? Alexander started to speak, but Amelia touched his arm. Actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to tell this part. He nodded, and she took a deep breath before continuing. The truth is, I didn't delete that contract. Claire did. We have proof. Security footage shows her at Alexander's computer an hour before I arrived for my regular cleaning duties. She created a situation she could use to her advantage, never expecting that Alexander would react the way he did. And how did he react? He saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. Amelia glanced at Alexander, drawing strength from his presence. Instead of firing me, he gave me a chance to prove my capabilities. Everything that followed, my involvement in the merger negotiations, my contributions to the revised contract, those were earned, not manipulated. Anderson leaned forward. Alexander, what made you take that risk? It wasn't a risk, Alexander replied. It was recognition. In an industry built on appearances and advantages, Amelia showed me something real: integrity, resilience, and a perspective I desperately needed. A perspective that ultimately cost you the Sterling merger. The merger failed because people chose to believe gossip over facts. But looking back, I'm grateful. Alexander's hand found Amelia's. It taught me what really matters in business and in life. The interview continued, covering everything from Claire's manipulations to their growing relationship. They showed the evidence of Claire's deception, but never with bitterness or accusations. Instead, they focused on their own story, two people from different worlds finding unexpected common ground. When Anderson asked about the future, Amelia surprised everyone, including herself, by pulling out her camera. May I show you something?" She handed him a photograph she had taken that morning, Alexander in her tiny kitchen, making coffee in his expensive suit, while Luna watched from the counter. The intimacy and contradiction of the image was striking. "This is what's real," she said, "not the scandals or the social climbing stories or the class warfare narratives everyone wants to write. Just life, messy and beautiful and true." Anderson studied the photo. "You're quite talented." "She is," Alexander agreed, "which is why I've asked her to head Blake Industries' new charitable foundation, focusing on arts education and opportunity creation for underprivileged communities." Amelia turned to him in shock. This was the first she'd heard of it. "If she accepts," he added with a slight smile. "It would be a shame to waste her eye for finding beauty in unexpected places." The interview wrapped up shortly after, ending with a shot of them on Amelia's small balcony, the Queen's skyline behind them. A very different view from Blake Manor, but beautiful in its own way. As the crew packed up their equipment, Anderson paused by Amelia's wall of photographs. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I think you've given people something they desperately need right now. Proof that authenticity still matters, that real connections can transcend artificial barriers." After everyone left, Amelia and Alexander stood in her suddenly quiet apartment. Luna had emerged from hiding and was again winding around Alexander's legs, purring loudly. "A charitable foundation?" Amelia finally asked. "But the idea came to me last night, looking at your photographs." He pulled her close. "You see the world in a way that could help a lot of people. If you want to, that is. What about the board? The shareholders? They'll adapt. Besides," he smiled, "I have a feeling our interview just changed a lot of minds." Her phone buzzed, a text from Rosa. "You were bellissima. Come for dinner tonight. Both of you." "No cameras this time?" Alexander read the message over her shoulder. "What do you say? Ready to face the real world?" Amelia looked around her apartment, at her photographs capturing life's honest moments, at Luna contentedly accepting Alexander as part of their family, at the morning sun painting everything in hopeful new light. "Actually," she said, reaching for her camera, "I'd like to capture this moment first." The photograph she took would later hang in her office at the Blake Foundation. Alexander laughing as Luna jumped onto his shoulder, the morning light turning them both to gold, proof that sometimes the most beautiful portraits are the ones we never expected to take. 6 months later, the Blake Foundation Gallery was hosting its inaugural exhibition. The converted warehouse space in Queens hummed with energy as visitors moved between photographs, capturing moments of everyday grace. A construction worker sharing his lunch with a stray cat, children playing in fire hydrant spray on a hot summer day, an elderly couple dancing in their small apartment. Amelia stood in the corner, watching people's reactions to her work. She wore a simple black dress that felt like armor, comfortable, confident, entirely her own. The exhibition, titled "Dignity in Small Moments," had already attracted attention from major art critics, but that wasn't what made her proud. What mattered were the art students from local schools touring the space, their eyes wide with possibility. The Foundation's scholarship program had already changed lives, providing opportunities that Amelia wished she'd had when she was younger. The Times reviewer just arrived. Alexander's voice came from behind her. He looked different these days, still impeccably dressed, but softer somehow, more approachable. Although I think you have a bigger fan over there. He nodded toward Rosa, who was holding court near a photograph of her hands kneading dough, regaling a group of admirers with stories about her restaurant. Tony stood nearby, beaming with pride. Hard to believe it's only been 6 months, Amelia said, leaning back against Alexander's chest as his arms wrapped around her waist. Having regrets about leaving housekeeping to run a charitable foundation, about moving in with you, about letting Luna destroy your antique Persian rugs. She turned in his arms, smiling. Not a single one. The months since their interview had brought changes neither of them had expected. The Blake Foundation had grown into something remarkable, focusing not just on arts education, but on finding and nurturing talent in unexpected places. Alexander had stepped back from day-to-day operations at Blake Industries, letting his carefully chosen successor handle the corporate world while he focused on philanthropic initiatives. They split their time between the manor and Amelia's apartment, which she'd kept as both a photography studio and a reminder of where they started. Luna ruled both homes with equal authority. "There's something I want to show you," Alexander said, taking her hand. He led her to a curtained-off section of the gallery. "This area's not part of the exhibition," Amelia protested. "It is now." He pulled back the curtain to reveal a single photograph, larger than the others. Amelia's breath caught as she recognized it. The picture she'd taken the morning of their interview, Alexander laughing as Luna perched on his shoulder, but beside it hung another photo she'd never seen. "Security footage from my office," Alexander explained softly. "The night you supposedly deleted the contract." The grainy image showed Amelia at his desk, determination evident even in the poor quality of the frame. Below it was a simple caption. "The moment everything changed. I had it enhanced," he continued. "Look at your expression. Even then, even thinking you'd made this huge mistake, there's such dignity in how you handled it. That's when I started falling in love with you, even if I didn't know it yet." Amelia touched the photo gently. "Why show this now?" "Because I have something to ask you." Alexander took both her hands in his. "Vivi, when I met you, I was running a company but barely living a life. You taught me to see beauty in real moments, to value truth over appearance, to—" "Alexander Blake," Amelia interrupted, her heart racing. "Are you proposing to me at my own photography exhibition?" "Actually," he smiled, "I'm proposing to you in front of evidence of the exact moment my life started making sense. And I didn't even have to delete any contracts to make it happen." She laughed through sudden tears. "That's not funny." "Then why are you laughing?" He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "The ring was my grandmother's. A real one, not something I bought to impress the board. Although," he opened the box to reveal a stunning vintage diamond, "I think they'll be impressed anyway." "The press will have a field day," Amelia warned, but she was already reaching for the ring. "The maid who became a CEO's wife." "No," Alexander corrected gently. "The artist who taught a CEO how to really see the world. The woman who proved that real love doesn't care about social barriers. My partner in everything that matters." "Well, when you put it that way." She held out her hand, letting him slide the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. From the main gallery, they could hear Rosa's delighted exclamation. She'd obviously been watching. Soon, the room would be full of well-wishers, reporters would be calling, and the next chapter of their story would begin. But for now, they stood in front of the photos that captured their beginning, holding each other in comfortable silence. Through the gallery windows, the Queen's sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, while inside, dozens of photographs testified to the beauty of ordinary moments, made extraordinary by love. "You know what this means," Amelia said finally, her head resting on Alexander's chest. "You'll have to learn to cook. No more relying on Rosa to feed us. Actually," he smiled against her hair, "I've been taking secret lessons from Tony. Did you really think I was working late every Wednesday?" Is that what you were doing? I thought you were planning this proposal. Amelia Carter, he laughed. I've been planning this proposal since the moment you stood up to the board in borrowed Louboutins. The cooking lessons were just a bonus. As if on cue, Rosa appeared with a tray of her famous cannoli. For strength, she winked, just as she had that night at the restaurant, and for love, always for love. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and the gallery grew quiet, Amelia took one last photograph. It showed their joined hands against the backdrop of New York's glittering skyline. Her grandmother's ring catching the light, just so. But what made the image special wasn't the ring or the view. It was the realness of the moment, the perfect imperfection of two people who had found each other against all odds. She would title it Perfect Focus and hang it in their home, a reminder that sometimes life's most beautiful portraits are the ones we never saw coming, captured in moments of absolute clarity when we finally learn to see what was there all along. Thanks for watching to the end. Did you like the story? Tell us what you thought in the comments below. We want to know what you think. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe now for more exciting stories you won't want to miss. Activate the bell to be notified whenever a new video comes out. See you in the next story. See you there.